Captain Midnight.
When Thor Ragnarok was announced a few years ago, the internet seemed to mostly react with indifference. And it made sense. The Thor series has always kind of felt like the black sheep of the MCU family. I don't consider either of the first two awful or anything, but I don't think you'll find many people who rank them as one of their favorite Marvel movies either. But the more people started seeing out of Ragnarok, the more it seemed to gain steam, leading to some pretty great reviews and an opening weekend box office that more than doubled that of the first film back in 2011. So what changed exactly? I'm gonna try to break that down here and dig into why the new movie seems to have connected with audiences on a level the previous films never could. Oh, and just to get this out of the way up front, there will be some light spoilers.
Cross the rainbow bridge of Asgard, where the booming heavens roar.
Let's take a step back and talk about what may have not worked so well in the last two Thor movies. To paraphrase Mike from Breaking Bad, never choose a half measure when you should go all the way. And that was my problem with the first Thor film. It was scared to embrace the absurd, out there, and over-the-top nature of its source material. And I totally understand why. The superhero movie landscape was a very different place back in 2011, and there was no guarantee that audiences would accept Thor, the God of Thunder, the same way they accepted more grounded characters like Spider-Man and Batman. It was a pretty big risk. But being so scared of that risk is part of what made that movie a bit unsatisfying. They ditched the faux Shakespearean dialogue of early Thor comics, which I miss but I can understand. But more importantly, I think they lost sight of one of the core appeals of Thor. The colorful, eye-popping, and absolutely insane imagery created by Jack Kirby and countless other artists through the years. A lot of that movie took place in a drab desert town, and even Asgard looks a lot more dull than it should. It all felt very tied down to the conventions of the superhero movie. Compare this to Ragnarok, which jumps from one well-designed and interesting locale to the next, with color and style to spare. Even the Earth locations are a lot more visually interesting than the bargain basement backlot town of the first film. In fact, the only planet that I didn't think was all that great was Asgard itself. And the movie seemed to agree with me, as we don't really spend too much time there. And as those who've seen it know, there's not much of a chance we'll be spending much time there in the future. Between the creature designs, the sets, and the fun performances from new characters like Valkyrie and the Grandmaster, it's very clear that the Ragnarok team set out to create something a lot more splashy and fun this time around.
Look! It's Thor! He's free! Now for the moment of reckoning.
But even more important, I think, is how Ragnarok shifted the portrayal of Thor himself. I might be in the minority on this, but I prefer the Dark World to the first Thor by quite a bit. But the reason for that sadly has nothing to do with Thor himself, but with how much fun Loki is in it. He steals every scene he's in, and ultimately is a lot more compelling than our somewhat generic God of Thunder. This is kind of a problem, and it's probably what made Chris Hemsworth so unhappy, who reportedly felt like he was being held back in The Dark World and Age of Ultron. And apparently that all came to a head after he listened to a Kevin Smith podcast bashing the Thor franchise. According to Hemsworth, hearing someone like Smith, who represents the fanboy world, was such a kick in the ass to change gears. We sort of had nothing to lose. People didn't expect what we did with it this time around. And I think it's hard to disagree. Whether you like Ragnarok or not, they definitely went in an unexpected direction. I especially liked how it handled Thor and Loki's relationship. I think Loki is great, and I'm glad he's still around, but in past Thor projects, he's had the effect of overshadowing his more straightforward brother in a way that undermined Thor's character. Ragnarok was able to retain all of Loki's Weasley snake oil charm, while not having to make Thor look like a complete moron to do it. Honestly, it was a refreshing twist to see Thor completely ready for Loki's betrayal. And also, it's pretty cool that the film that has Chris Hemsworth at his goofiest also features Thor at his smartest. Then of course there's the new love interest. Well, okay, it's probably too early to declare Valkyrie the new love interest, although let's be honest, that's probably where things are heading. Either way, she's replacing Jane, who we learned dumped Thor sometime after Ultron. I'm a big fan of Natalie Portman, but wow, is she really underserved by the Thor franchise, and understandably had little interest in returning after the Dark World, which worked in Ragnarok's favor, I think, because there really wasn't room for a romantic subplot. And while I wish the movie had spent a little more time developing Valkyrie, she does manage to get one of the funniest entrances in MCU history, and finally gives the Thor franchise a female lead that doesn't feel like your standard issue, underwritten superhero girlfriend type. So there's a lot of potential here, but like I said, I really wanted just a few more scenes with her, especially scenes delving into why she abandoned Asgard so completely after her defeat at the hands of Hela. That's a fairly minor complaint though, and what's otherwise a pretty great performance from Tessa Thompson. Speaking of Valkyrie, we meet the character on the garbage planet of Sekar, which is featured in not just the best section of the movie, but also the section that I think is the most emblematic of why I like Ragnarok so much more than the first two films. I've always loved the crazier planets and locales you'd see in things like Walt Simonson's classic run, and I felt like that was always something missing from the movies, where previously most of your time is spent on Earth or in Asgard. Sekar is a lot more interesting than those places, and it's clear that the movie is a lot more interested in what's going on there than what's going on with Hela on Asgard, which seems a bit more by the numbers. And then of course there's the Hulk, whose inclusion I was pretty excited about. I think it would have been a little more exciting had I walked into the theater having no idea he was in it, but it was still pretty satisfying. Both Hulk and Bruce are treated a lot more comedically here than they have been in past Marvel movies. I mean seriously, can you picture Edward Norton's Hulk hanging out with Thor as a space gladiator? It's stuff like that that reminds you how far the MCU has come. And I really like Ruffalo's performance here, as it's clear that he has a lot more space to have fun and improvise than he did in either of the Avengers movies. The way Thor plays off of both Banner and the Hulk was probably my favorite element of the movie, and after seeing it, I really don't want to see another Thor sequel without him. It's clear that in 2017, general audiences have seen so many superhero movies come and go that they're not just willing, but desperate to see one that attempts to be a bit more out there. And it's that little extra push that makes Thor Ragnarok the best Thor movie ever made. Hey guys, just so you know, I am doing a Q&A this month, my first one ever, and I would love to hear from you. If you have any questions for me, feel free to leave them in the comments, ask me on Facebook, or Twitter @MidnightCap. I can't wait to answer your questions, and I will see you again next week.